When he's on the bus, but there will be a charge.
I've written to Phil Logie, but he's not come back to me yet.
Right.
Just to try and clear it up, you know. Because if it's going to be effectively free on the bus or whatever, I would like to be able to say that.
Yeah.
But the last thing I want is 20 people going up and then suddenly can't afford that.
Yeah. I would just make them aware that it might be the case like this.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, these are running ones.
I didn't get you. In his troubles like Christmas meeting. If anybody hasn't got the newsletter, can you come and get one and sign for it, please?
That's not your claim to fame out, but
Can we get the newsletter and sign for it?
I'll put you there now.
You don't be done
I've got to go up early and do all the order of service and now.
5 times the buses have been out in 4 weeks. All 3 of them out to sort of the short distance rallies, which are Howland and Preston Park, and they each had a run out, 99 for the Jupiter, so wasn't it all bad news, you know. So far this month anyway, taking all or more than one bus to more than one rally, we're still covering our costs on it. We're slowing up a little bit, but we're still doing very well. Taken £820 this year against an equivalent of a little bit under 700 the last 2 years put together again. So, you know, it's remarkable. We're taking about 2,800 quid on the stall since the season opened up. So
we did £1,000 on the Metro Centre.
Yeah, although
first time ever in our 30 years.
Brilliant if it continued like that for the rest of the season. It'd make up some of what we've lost in the last 2 years. Then we've only got the 3 events next month. 17th of July, we're intending going to the Beamish Bus Bonanza. Probably just be with 106 and 223. But going back to Beamish at all.
Yeah.
Trust me.
These young ones.
Yeah,
What
right.
about putting the room money up, Norman? Right?
he made a suggestion to put the room higher Monday.
Yeah.
I really think it would be appropriate in that sense, because if what we're doing, we're still taking enough money, surely it's the committee of this building
Yes.
downstairs will tell you what you need to do
Yeah.
regarding an issue like that.
It's a committee decision for us as well, Peter.
Right. But,
It's,
I mean, in the long run, we're just getting back, so to
Yeah.
speak, after the 2 years. And to some people, it's a lifestyle to come here. But as prices are going up through the roof on a daily basis, right across the board, not so many people may well turn up then if things are starting to go. Because if some people have to get buses here,
yeah.
it can be an expensive do altogether.
Yeah. We're sensitive.
Just a suggestion. that's
No,
all.
we're sensitive to that, Peter. If you read the very start of my piece in the newsletter this month, I've started off with an apology because we set the bar a little bit too high on something anyway. And on reflection, no, shouldn't have done. So we'll take that on board. Yeah. Okay. Peter.
So for your rally prizes, we have this
Rally prizes. Rally prizes.
raffle prizes. So you see, not making mistakes. Oh, Plaxton Paramount coach. Okay. Wallace Arnold Bedford OB. And a rather nice book called Steaming Around Britain, which is all about preserved railways in the UK. It's in the plastic cover, so don't worry about the tear there. Okay.
Right. Okay, Chris. So, notwithstanding all my kind words to Peter Nardone, we'll now come round and try and separate you from your money for the room and the raffle, if you would. We'll try and get underway for about 8 o'clock, Chris,
Yeah,
for this evening's main presentation. Okay, thank you very much.
I'll come for the room when you pass over.
Here you go.
Just a pound. Just watch that.
Oh yeah,
Is it anything like competition with John now, I'm Big books out.
where's he from?
Poland. Polish.
Pull the curtains together, please.
Yeah, we did have connection issues with the phone. We're not past Facebook.
Terry?
Back up now. Keeps dropping frames, like he has losing connection and comes back up.
So
It's got like a
Graham, I
buffer.
put you into
So long, so
It's trying.
Greg Round, Rogan, Jeff.
I have to wait the 66. I will have to wait the 66 for the state one if I'm still alive.
Can I throw an idea at you?
Yes, I always.
The old little depots.
Well, it would if we had any space. Yes.
All right.
Everything else we put outside.
Yes. Like a car, like a car boot.
You can try and make it running.
Well, big Manchester.
From the council,
That's the best transport system.
I don't want to say 60 is a Manchester.
Establish that as a real thing.
Not to 59,
Charge people 5,000 for the year. Well, you could advertise the machine. We want also to make sure that it doesn't clash with anything else. So if we did it, maybe it's the beginning of April or something.
ago.
Alright.
Yeah.
Right, okay, we shall now draw the raffle. I've had enough of being like a team leader.
I saw two, you know, there were these strange contracts. I never handled them. And I saw them with the red practically crying. I went and I said, I had to go in this office.
Right, who's got the Renault minibuses? 326 to 330.
Oh, that's that.
Yay!
And remember, I said,
Can you have a look what you'd like to choose?
I don't like having to do that. I said, oh, I think not. I said, at that time it was the second one I'd seen him. I saw him at Newman. That was a similar thing.
There you go.
Thank you very much, Mike. Premier Coach Bedford will be...
You'll be going down the stairs.
Do you want to draw one of these?
Yeah.
382 to 384.
That's me. I'll have the Premier Coach, please.
There we are. One Premier Coach. Thank you very much, sir.
The Paramount.
It's just a model grip.
Oh, it is
It
a
is. You had
Paramount.
your name on it, that, didn't you?
It'll end up getting angry, that.
Stick your hand in there, sir. Right, 356 to 360. So Bedford's in 11. Well done. There we are. One Wallace. Right, so if you want to put your dead tickets in here.
I got another one.
No, I nearly wished you luck, but I thought she'd bring that my just jinx it.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Done.
This evening's speaker, Chris Hall, no introduction required. Subject, chasing the 500s.
Chasing the 500s.
The talk may even have something to do with chasing the 500s, I don't know, but you presumably welcome comments from the floor as we go along, Chris?
Yes,
Your
absolutely.
usual style.
Usual style.
Ladies and gentlemen,
It's my first time here. I've never done this before. Right, okay, so the title of this, can you see all right if I stand here? You're taller than us, you can hang from the ceiling. Right, okay, the title of this is called Chasing the 500s, plus a look at what was going around the Cleveland Transit fleet at the time the 500s were being withdrawn. Back in 1982, my mum bought me a Shinnon C4 camera, and I used to go around taking photographs with it. This was the very first Cleveland Transit bus that I photographed. It's a unrebodied Leyland Atlantean H48, and the only reason I photographed it is because the window's missing on the top deck. It was actually leaned up against the seat. You wouldn't get away with that now. They'd stop and change the bus over. But it was coming down Billingham Bank, and I thought I'll get a picture of this. So that picture actually sparked my interest in transit buses. I did photograph other things as well, cars, fire engines, trains, scenery and all the rest of it. And some days I'd use 50 rolls of film in one hit. Yeah. Next. That's not the right one.
No, because you didn't number them right, Chris.
I did, I went right through them.
You can't number them 1 to 100, it doesn't work like that.
Oh, okay.
Told you, you got to name them A, B, C. Because it does 1 to 10.
Oh, for God's sake.
I tell you this every time.
001 all the way through to, it worked perfectly on Liz's computer.
Yeah, but Liz,
Jesus Christ. Right, okay then. So since the computer seems to have messed it up again, because I did get them all consecutively numbered and it worked on the other laptop. Right, so this is the late 80s, from about 1985 through to about 1988. What I used to do was go in my car and sit on the high street with a telephoto lens and just photograph stuff coming past. I also used to stand outside the depot gate, like you young lads do, and photograph what was coming out. And this picture of 571 was taken on my only visit to South Bank depot. This was just in the process of closing because it was an early casualty of deregulation and South Bank depot was closed. And when I went, there was a couple of 500s and a couple of the bits and pieces in the scrapyard. But I went middle of the day, but most of the stuff was out. Psychedelic. Oh, God.
why is it starting with number 1?
It's really bollocksed it up, hasn't it?
Start with number 1. There we go. Right, number 1.
Right. Okay, so number 2.
There we go.
Right. Back in 1986, 500s were dwindling rapidly. The first one that was withdrawn was L501, which did so in 19 itself over some pipes in ICI Wilton. I do have a picture, but I couldn't find it, so hence it's not in. But this was another grab shot in the winter of 1985-86 when we had some proper snow. I was down at the bottom of Billingham Bank, and this thing came hurtling round the roundabout, so I thought I'd photograph it, and it splashed me with a load of sludge to say thank you. But that's 551, which is one of the fairly late survivors. 52 at that time would run round New Road and go up Mill Lane. This one was taken off the top of the Swallow Hotel car park in 1984. Again, I was just experimenting with photography and just photographing whatever buses I could find. I worked at the Swallow Hotel at the time, and this little crowd of people here were all working at the Swallow Hotel as well, so 20 odd at the time. We looked about 12.
What were you doing at the Swallow Hotel then? What was
I had the misfortune to be a kitchen porter,
All right,
and then the greater misfortune to be a night porter,
right.
which was pretty crap really, but it was okay in some respects. I mean, you got to meet some famous people. I mean, I once met Diane Keane, and she was staggering down the corridor like this, absolutely rat-arsed. And me and my mate had to sort of like help her into her room, you know, and she was literally couldn't stand in some cases.
From the Cuckoo Waltz.
You what? The Cuckoo
From the
Waltz.
Cuckoo Waltz.
And she was having a waltz of her own. And then you had Larry Grayson and other people like that, because they all appeared at Billingham Forum and they all stayed at the Swallow Hotel.
Yeah.
And I always remember we had this young manageress start, and on her first night, somebody killed themselves in room 24 and she had to sit with a corpse till the police came. So she was like, you know, but it wasn't a nice job, and I didn't like it, and I shouldn't have been, I wish I'd never done it.
So far, your work reminiscences have been more interesting than the bus pictures.
Oh, you haven't heard the best bit yet. When I was a night porter, we used to get Cleveland Constabulary, and all the coppers on the beat would all come in for a cup of tea. And one night we had about 8 coppers all sat round the table, and they were all sat there drinking the tea, and the sergeant pulled up in his little Ford Fiesta. Quick, it's the sergeant! And about 8 coppers legged it out the back door. There was another occasion when I was taking staff home, and this is when I was young and daft, I was doing 75 mile an hour up Norton Road racing somebody in an Alfa Romeo. Police car going the other way came
I
and
don't
flash,
believe
flash,
that
flash.
one bit.
I can tell you, I swear on anybody's life that that is true, right?
I think you were reading kilometres, not miles.
No,
mate.
no. It was the Ford Cortina staff car, and I got flashed up by the police. He says, "You're going a bit fast there." I says, "I'm just taking staff home." He says, "I should charge you, but if we come round for a cup of tea later, we'll see you all right." So that was that. That's the only time I've ever speeded. I've never done it since. You know, but that was the one and only time I speeded. And the other thing was, again, a ring of police officers sat round the table, and this bloke had broke in the back of the Swallow Hotel, came through the door. All the coppers looked at him like they do on the Sweeney. He just went like that. So, but it wasn't a very good place to work. I didn't like it.
It's starting to come down this month.
Yeah, apparently so, yes. Again, in the high street, in the same winter that I took the 500 off, I went down the high street and I photographed the Cleveland Transit vehicles that were there at the time. This is Fleet Line 121 rather, and what it was actually doing was just actually sliding to a halt there. Yeah, on the ice. This is when the crew changeover was in the Shambles office. Yeah. The leopard in front was 423, which was one of the first ones in the new deregulation livery. No, it didn't, unfortunately. Next. That's one going the other way. 127, that was trying to get out of the bus stop. Again, when we had real snow, it was tanking down with snow that day. Very cold, but I got some good pictures.
Looks like it's already come a cropper somewhere from that battery box panel at the front.
Yes. Yes. They seem to flop open quite a lot on them, because I remember going down the A689 and one of these fleet lines was going up to Hartlepool and the battery box door was flopping away like this, so I followed him and I got out and told him there is battery box.
Was he skidding down the road because his front wheels seemed to be...
Yeah, he was trying to get out of it, you know. Next. This was just parked up where we park our 500 crew buses prior to a run. Fleet Line 145, looking very nice there, ready to go in a private hire. Yeah, it was just sitting there, so I photographed it. You know, those days I could go to the, I could just go to the depot and just look in. You know, and how I actually got into the depot, because I'd left the Swallow Hotel and I got a job in Halfords and I'd been there for a couple of years. And we got this big bloke in, he looked like Bigfoot, and he had this transit tie on. I want a bike for my daughter and I want it ready at 4 o'clock, see to it. And I thought, okay then, right, we'll do that. So I got his bike ready for his daughter at 4 o'clock. And I said, are you a bus driver? He says, no, I'm the commercial manager. Mr. Jameson's the name. I said, right, okay then. We're in to photograph the buses. Just write to me, I'll sort you out. Gruff, gruff, gruff. Away he went with his bike. Happy, never saw him again. But I wrote in, got a depot pass, and hey presto, I went into the depot. Next. This is another one taken from the car. Rebodied Atlantean, number 50, sitting on the high street. It was quite good when the high street was a proper high street and you could park in the middle. You could sit in the middle with a telephoto lens and click as everything went past. It was great. You know, you didn't have to get out of the car or make an effort to do anything. So that's, again, one of my favourite T-siders, Atlantean 50, in its rebodied state. And H66, that was the one that was the motor show, which was originally 30 foot long and then they lengthened it to 33 foot. Sorry, no, it was 33 foot long, then they shortened it to 30 foot long, and then they bought a body for it because Transit got the chassis on the cheap and they bought it and put the body on it. That was the one that went to Applebee's of Lincolnshire, and it ran into a tree during a high storm, so it was killed and so was the tree. Next. Maltby Auctions, just outside of Yarm, or Mannerheim Auctions as it is now, or used to be, was the disposal place for council-owned vehicles. You could go in there and you could find fire engines, you could find bin wagons, you could find Cleveland Transit buses, you could find military vehicles. They had a couple of armoured cars there once. And I went in there and sort of like asked if I could go in and photograph these things, and they said, yeah, no problem. Again, this was in the early 80s when health and safety wasn't an issue and you could go in and wander around and photograph what you like. And this is a little group of withdrawn 500s about 1983. The middle one hasn't got an air vent so on the roof, so that's one of the first batch. I think you worked it out which one it was, didn't you, Mark?
No, I was struggling.
Yeah.
Is that auction still trading then, or is it?
No, it's gone now.
It's gone now.
It's long gone now.
Pallet company.
Yeah. It went from council vehicles to lease vehicles, and that was the end of that after that. Yeah, but it was like the hallowed ground. You could go in there and photograph Cleveland Transit buses. They wouldn't tell you who they'd sold them to, but you could go and photograph them. Next.
It was probably one of the last 3 J-Reg ones, that, because I think that must have dated from 1984, that picture.
Yeah, it's about that date.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is my one and only visit to South Bank Depot. South Bank Depot was a victim of deregulation, which was either the best thing or the worst thing, depending on your attitude. The depot was literally in its final days. Stuff was getting moved over to Middlesbrough, and I just turned up on the front and started photographing stuff. Never occurred to me to go in and sort of like ask for it to go around. This was before I worked, before I'd got the depot pass, you see. It took me ages to find it, because of course in those days I didn't really know Teesside much. I'd just passed my driving test and sort of like I was still exploring the place. But anyway, that's South Bank Depot, looking up in the time-honoured view where the trolley wires used to go up the hill and buses would be parked in the yard. And that's the depot buildings. Next. That's the depot buildings from either side, showing the main offices. It was used by a company called Cater Fast Foods after it closed, and when the trolleybus Gadge 15 came back to Kirkleatham, it was posed against the doors there. They reversed it in, and then they dragged it out again, and it promptly knackered the top of the doors because they'd changed the doors slightly. And of course in 1991, when we had the 21st withdrawal of the anniversary, 21st anniversary of the withdrawal of Teesside trolleybuses, that was the finishing point for the rally, because the building was still intact, the yard was still intact. We had all the preserved trolleys brought down into the yard, all the preserved buses into the yard, lined them all up. It was a good day, that. Next, that's the depot yard at South Bank Depot. You can see a dead 500 in the corner there, and another one on the right, and one of the duple body Leopards, a 370 type coach on the right, and I think that's 406 in the middle. So slot bang in there. So 574, that just turned up on the outside. It came down the road and parked up, so I photographed it. Great advert, make it Samson Delilah. Pun on words. Next. And 575 was in the depot yard. Again, I didn't go in, I just had a telephoto lens and took that. It was waiting to come out. And some interesting cars there. The little grey one on the left is a Fiat 126, which when I worked at the auctions in Wall's End, I nearly bought one of those for 30 quid, but some damn student outbid me, didn't he? It was a tiny little thing. You could, the seats were so close together and the gear stick was that thick. And when the engine was running, it sounded like a bloody hairdryer. And the gear stick was like that, so it was constantly banging against your leg. And I thought, great, it's quirky, I love that, but some wretched student bought it. Next. There's the one of 571 again in the depot yard, just turning to come out. So by 1986 we were down to about 2500s. Next. And then I went to Middlesbrough Depot. This is the time-honoured view of Middlesbrough. The trainer on the left is 559, and then you've got a couple of 500s parked up against the wall there, and one of the later fleet lines. When I applied for the depot pass to go around Stockton, I also asked to see if I could go around Middlesbrough as well, and Mr. Jameson said, yes, no problem, this pass will cover both of them. So after I'd done Stockton, where I met Johnny Walker, we then went down to Middlesbrough. Next. Before Middlesbrough Depot, that's when Parliament Road was relatively civilised and you could do such things. And I stood opposite the gate and took 565 there. which was going to work in 11 to Colby Newham, but it was parked there. And you can see the traffic light system for the entry into the depot there from the days of Middlesbrough Corporation. And the leopards were sitting on the opposite side, but the sun was slightly brighter there, so I got a better picture of the two leopards, 417 and 418, consecutively numbered. And a further visit resulted in getting 362 in that area. Next. The scoop was this. I went round the side, round the car park side to look through the wire mesh, and this thing was coming out. The last surviving ex-Saltburn motor services, one of two, 353 and 354. And I photographed it there, and I legged it round the side, because I'm not very good at running. I legged it round the side and just in time to see the back end of it disappearing down Parliament Road, so, but at least I got it there coming through the wash. They were the first two buses to be scrapped and bought and scrapped by North East Bus Breakers when they first started up. Yeah, I've cursed them every day ever since.
What was the one in the background, Chris, in the news?
359.
359.
Yeah, the Ducal Leopard. 359 was the only Ducal Leopard to get the new livery. It had been painted in the Transit Green and Jasmine, but apparently Malcolm Howard said no, it should be in the new livery, and within a couple of days of it being painted, it was back in the paint shop again, getting painted in the deregulation livery. Next. That's a slightly blurred picture of 567 in Middlesbrough Depot. Now, yeah, when I went, I only went round the compound. I didn't go actually into the depot. That's one of Johnny Walker's pictures. Next. Middlesbrough Depot Yard had about 8 or 9 500s all lined up, waiting to be disposed of. 544 there in the middle was the only active one, and at that time it lived in Middlesbrough. The other one of interest is the second one in from the right, L562, which had brackets for L plates on the front because it was a temporary trainer. Now, I never got the chance to photograph it with the L plates on, and the only time I ever saw it was when I was working in Halfords, and I was just idly standing there looking out the window when you do, and it rumbled past with L plates on, and I thought, damn, I haven't got my camera. Next. There's a better view of it, and 574. By this time, South Bank had closed, and everything that had been at South Bank had moved over to Middlesbrough. Now, a friend of mine lived up in Roseworth, so I used to go up there on my bike, and I was cycling up on my bike, which was really exhausting. Luckily, I had my camera there, because we were actually going to go to an air show. And I'd cycled up on my bike, and I happened to look left, and down, I think, is it Rostover Avenue, I think it's called? Rostover. That was sat there, broken down. So naturally I went and photographed it, and this Asian chap on the left was giving me such a dirty look when I was photographing it. He didn't like me photographing it at all, but hey, public place, I'll photograph it if I like.
Someone's done a quality job on the stretch panel between the decks, like.
Haven't they just, yeah.
Front to back.
Well, a bit more about 560 later, but about this time, 1987, we were down to about 4 or 5 of these now. Next. In front of it was this, the Leyland Clydesdale tow wagon, possibly my favourite Teesside vehicle. And what had happened was the fleet line had ground to a halt, and this thing had come to sort it out. It didn't tow it off, it just started up and they both drove off. So, but that was my first picture of that, and I was chuffed to bits to get that. Stockton Depot, again from the depot gates. That's a look inside the compound, about 1987. By now, the then new livery, deregulation livery, was starting to make itself known, and there were a couple of buses in there. I know some of the young lads stand at the gate now and photograph in. I did it first. This is the first view ever that I took of Stockton Depot. The interesting vehicle is, of course, the Leyland Sherpa crew bus. Yes. They had two, not at the same time. The Sherpas replaced the Ford Transit crew buses, That one was based at Stockton, and that was the only time I managed to get it in a picture. I'll see, Mark, if you can do a blow up of that. Try, yeah, it's a bit grainy, but it'll be all right. You can see the amount of rubbish that's laid there. I mean, some of it's still there now. But that's when all the deckers used to line up in front of the pits area. And that's a slightly different view. A couple of rebodied Atlanteans and fleet lines and Dominators. Next. And another view inside the compound with a fleet line on the old water point. Now where the fleet line is, where the 500 is, they used to have a pair of hydraulic lifts. Most of you will have seen that picture of the gay hostess up in the air on a big pair of hydraulic lifts. Well, that's where it was, where it's parked. It was a chassis cleaning part. Next. Now this picture was interesting because, again, this is before I actually got an official trip round it. I went to see the dead buses, and I tried to take a photo of the wall, but being only 5 foot something and the wall's like 6 foot, you know. So I went back home and got a stool. Stool by the fence, climbed up the stool, click, 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 got down again. There's a bloke stood there giving me a funny look. But that one's 552 with an old Cleveland Transit advert on it, and a nice Ford Cortina there, and a load of other dead stuff. Next. This is Johnny Walker on the right. He and I were the founders of the 500 group. We actually sat and discussed starting a preservation group on Teesside. The other chap is Paul Livesey, who we still see sometimes, and that's in the old control room. So the door is where the glass window is now. You know the glass window where you ask for the keys? That's where that window is. You can see the control room, it's almost prehistoric. Yeah. Next. Now, when we actually got into the depot, we met another chap called Richard Smiles, who has done wonders as far as archiving is concerned. And we went in to the depot and we saw 569. And I said to Richard, any chance of that getting brought out for a photo? So he went and seen the shift hand, and he just pulled it a couple of yards forward, took a picture, and he reversed it back in again. So this is about late 1987, when again you were down to about 4 or 5 500s. 569 was one of them. Next. This is where the others were. On the other side of the fence, near the entrance, where the staff cars now park, was a row of about 4 or 5 dead 500s, all waiting to go to the scrapyard. All of these were all capable of being used, but they'd just been taken out of use and stored there. Next. That's the other side of them. You've got 552, 550, and 560, and 551. Only 560 was working out of that lot. Next. That's a dead one. I think that's 548, I'm not quite sure. Because what they used to do before going to scrapman, they would paint the numbers out. Yeah, that's another over the fence shot. Next. And 551 again in the dead line. The chassis is a Welsh Dennis Dominator from either Cardiff or Merthyr Tydfil, I can't remember which, but bought it for spares for the Dominator fleets. And it was reduced to just standing on blocks. It was carted off. Another dead one, unrecognisable. That was in the corner in the graveyard or the scrapyard. Next. And yet another one. Yeah, I can't make it out.
No.
No, it's too faded out. Next. This was there, Little Leyland Red Line. There were 2 of these. These were for the Gisborough Town Services, but by 1988, these were designated staff buggies. One nearly got preserved. Unfortunately, it didn't happen because there was an idiot involved. But it ended up being scrapped. They went off to Skelton Coaches when Skelton were just starting off, and they worked in the Gisborough area doing services similar to what they did with transit. There were 2 of them, 315 and 316. Next. Not long after that picture was taken, it was parked on the crock yard and it had a window broken. And they went through Maltby auctions with the duple-bodied leopard on the left here. 3 of them and the 2 Leyland red lines went through Maltby auctions. TMS bought 2 of the leopards. One of them was to repair an accident-damaged TMS leopard. One of them found its way into Northwestern, and one of them became the Cleveland Health Authority bus. And the red lines went to Skelton. That was there's its sister sitting in between 2 dead 500s and 360. 360 was the only one working there. Next.
What, with no seats in?
It's got seats, hasn't it?
No.
Oh, right, no. Yeah, dead then. There's a closer view of 316.
They look very duple-like, were they, duple-bodied?
Duple body, yeah. Duple dominant. Well, there were going to be Alexander Y types right until the last minute, and they changed the order to duple dominant. So I had an idea that we'd buy an Alexander Y type and do it up to Cleveland Transit spec as a what if, you know. Next. This was their duple-bodied Bedford, which had been shortened for the Gisborough Town services. This had been withdrawn, and the 4 of these were all sold off to Lancaster City Transport for use in and around Morecambe and Kendal. This was the last one to go, and a friend of mine, one Howard Williams, saw it parked up at the Steamtown place at Carnforth on a pair of ramps, getting examined. Yeah. Next. There's the back end of it, a little cluster of the vehicles after a rain shower, again on the first visit. And of course, go on, you can go on. And of course, no Cleveland Transit slideshow of mine is complete without this beastie. I love this beast. I just wish we'd saved it, I really do. I wish we'd bought that. It is phenomenal, that was, you know.
Is it your personal project, Chris?
Well, yeah, I mean, when it was withdrawn, it was rebodied in about 1986. They took it in, took the Willowbrook body off. Cleveland Transit built the frames. They sent it off by a wagon to Northern Counties, who panelled it and sent it back. Every single driver hated it. You know, the windscreen was a hodgepodge of specially cut glass which didn't fit. So when it went round corners, the windscreen was doing that. The one time I rode on it, I thought it was all right, light and airy, but the driver hated it. It went like a rocket, but he hated it. You know, I did an article in Classic Bus a couple of years ago on this bus called the Greenhouse Bus, which was its nickname at Transit. But surprisingly, when it was withdrawn, it was purchased by South Lancs Travel. And then even more surprisingly, it then went to White Ribbon Coaches of East Kilbride. And surprisingly even more, it went to a third operator called Gilchrist, who ran it in White Ribbon livery. And then it became a store shed. And when we were at Latharmond a couple of years ago, I asked one of the Scottish enthusiasts, do you know anything about this bus? And he goes, okay, it's in, what is it, Lark Hills, is it? Dunsmore's at Larkhill, in bits. He said, I've seen a funny looking leopard with a Fleetline front. And apparently it went into Dunsmore's at Larkhill. I said, did you take a photograph? Aye, but I don't know where it is. So I'm just waiting for a
So
photograph.
do they still have it then?
No, it's in bits now, it's gone. You know, had that been still surviving today, Liz, I'd have bought that. I would. Yeah.
You can see the dude having on Liz's face there.
Yes. I seriously swear I'd have bought that if that had been around today.
That's the thing.
That's it from the other side. Well, it would have been great in preservation. When the 500 group first started, we went to the Bradford Transport Museum and went to see Malcolm Howard. Can we take a bus to Bradford Transport Museum? He said, yes, anything you like. It was a toss-up between that and a Bristol VR. How I wish I'd chosen that. How I wish I'd chosen that. You know, it would have been its claim to fame. As it was, we took Bristol VR 114 and it was a dry run for 544. and we were denied ourselves the chance of taking that to a rally. It would have been bloody great. Anyway, when it was done, it spent quite a lot of time sat in the yard, but eventually it actually managed to get into service. And like I said, everybody hated it, but I did see it around Stockton a couple of times. It was fitted with a Dominator grille because when it was rebodied, they tagged it onto the back end of a Dominator order, because there was 4 of them getting built at the time, 1986, 87, 219 to 222, they were getting built. So they tagged that onto the back of that order, and the body number followed on from 222, which is why it had the Dominator front.
Well, and the front mounted radiator.
And the front mounted radiator, yeah. But they put a fleet line front on it later. Yeah. Anyway, so the contraption was out and it was in service, and I liked it. Next. And this little thing was still current in 1988. One of a pair of 4-day series with Northern Counties bodywork. They were the first post-war front-engined bodies by Northern Counties. So they were historically important. One of them went to Lancaster with the Shorten Bedfords. 317, its sister, came back to the northeast with cousins. That went off the radar and turned up as a motorhome in somewhere near a glider club in Cornwall somewhere. Now my sister was living in Cornwall at the time, and I told her about this and she went, So needless to say, she never sort of like found it.
Rob says what's behind
Right.
on hang on.
TMS Bristol LH.
No, Rob, you can't see it, Rob, unfortunately.
Yeah. At that time I was very pro-transit, I didn't really photograph anything else.
Sorry, there's about a 20-second delay between.
Yeah, yeah. The reason why I was very pro-transit is because when we talk to enthusiasts, they'd come up to Teesside and the North East to photograph Tyne Wear PT, Northern General, United, Independence, anything except transit. You know, so that's why I made it pro-transit, you know. But I did like Independence, but I just wasn't going to say so, you know.
You used to call him Scotty.
I did, yes. Some of them were Scotty, yeah. Yeah, next. Anyway, the 2 4-day series were taken out of use, 317 after a minor prank. So they went off to Lancaster as well, working this service on a Morecambe pier. Next. There's the back end of this, mainly because you don't see many back end views of those. But they used full-sized window units on them. They weren't minibus-sized windows, they were full bus-sized windows. Next. I also saw this on the first day I went to Transit, which was great, because I like service vehicles. That's the Leyland Terrier Stores wagon. I saw that quite a few times and got quite a few photos. It disappeared around 2000, and to this day I don't know where it went. Probably through the auctions, but it disappeared, it went off the radar. Yeah. Next. There's 360 again with PDC 778M. Now what they did with those, right, this deregulation was starting to get full swing, and Transit said these will go for sale, but nobody's getting to use them. So they had a guy with a big mallet and he went down the floors, smashing all the floors, so you could see the chassis underneath. Now, when these were sold off, a place called Wacton Coach Services, who you might have heard of, Graham.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, he sort of like bought a couple, put new floors in them and sold them on. Now that was the one I think went to TMS. The TMS used to run a large fleet of duple dominant bodied Leyland Leopards and Tigers, and they bought that to repair crash damage one. Next. This is in 1987, March 1987, because that's when H103 was painted in the new livery, and that's a little lineup of dead 500s and a brand newly painted Bristol VR. Make a nice Christmas card, that wouldn't it? Next. Now, I used to stand at the depot gate and watch what came out. This is going up to 1988 now, early 1988, and the 500s were down to 3 active survivors, 560, 569 and 544. Now, I was working at Halfords in Stockton town centre now, and I'd seen these things go past. I'd seen 560 as a staff bus. I thought, right, I'll take my camera to work, I'll go and photograph it after work. So I went down the depot, and H81 came out, followed by 560. Next. There she is, coming out on the staff buggy run. And I stood there for about an hour to watch it come back. Next. And there it is. That's its second time out, because I've moved down the road a bit there. Photographed it again. In those days, the drivers used to wave at you. There was none of this. Next. There she is coming back. I think that's a Fiat Ducato van. The car sales place is still there, somewhat surprisingly. That's coming off Maritime Road towards the depot. Next. There's the back end of it, and the Leyland Freight Rover going the other way. That was one of the evening Gazette vans. They used to run a large fleet of Leyland Sherpa stroke freight rovers in white with blue stripes on them.
We're looking for one for a project we've got in mind.
Ah, right, yeah. Tyne Tunnel used to have one. You can see if you can get that. Next. Then one day, just before the formation of the 500 group, we were starting to discuss which one we'd acquire for preservation. My personal favourite was 560, because I'd always seen it. It was every time I turned around, it was one of them. It was 560. And then one day, I came into the depot and saw it like that. I was like stunned, and it was sat there with the engine ripped out, up for withdrawal. So needless to say, I was traumatised for a week. Next. There's another view of it when it has stopped raining. Bits missing off it, so well and truly ready for the scrapyard. Next. Around about the same time, there were some interesting visitors to Stockton. Galaxy Travel of Red Cars, ex-Greater Manchester, I think it's an Atlantean, and KTJ 206C, which came from TWC, which I think was a shoe film. There were two of them. There was 204 and 206. 204 went to Northern and became a driver trainer with Northern. That was the one that was painted up in maroon and cream as their show bus, and it used to attend a load of rallies in the 90s. But that was there for a week and then it cleared off, so I don't know where that went.
It's now in Liverpool Preserved.
Yes, that's right, yeah. Next. So we were down to 569 and 544 running. So 569, I chased it all over the place. I'd come up the top of my mum's road at a rate of knots that shouldn't be in the highway code. Parked up, ran across the road into Middle Island and photographed it. It was coming past. And it was being closely pursued by an ex-Midland Red Leopard of TMS and being overtaken by a Ford Fiesta. He must have had some balls, that Fiesta driver. Yeah. There's the Leopard. This was opposite Collins Garage on Bank Top.
Is that S-plated?
You want?
Is that an S-plated leopard?
No. Enridge.
The
Yeah,
end, I think,
Enridge
Okay.
one. N or M.
I'll be a care. I did my PCV test in there
isn't it?
Little red leopard.
462.
With no single on first and second. It was a lovely day.
Well, this was at the time when, go back, when TMS were running a whole load of interesting stuff that wasn't just Bristol LHs, because one Bristol LH looks like another Bristol LH. But they had some ex-Midland Red Leopards, they had some Marshall-bodied Bristol LHs, which went off to Tyne and Weir, and they had two Willowbrook-bodied Fords, which came from Jersey. Now, I have heard that the Jersey Fords were actually used, but I never saw them in service. I photographed them in the depot, but I never saw them in service.
That's some Mark II Nationals from Scotland for a very
Yes,
brief
they did,
flight
yeah.
as well, didn't they?
Yeah, and they also got a load of West Midlands Nationals as well. Yeah. Next. This was 569 coming back, going past Spantop Garage. That was when the days when the 53 didn't go to Yarm anymore, it went to all sorts of places. Now the only time I caught the two together was in Middlesbrough bus station, and this was in the days before the bus station Gestapo, which I was a member. And according to some people in here.
Founder.
And this is when you could go in and photograph. So I stood on the side and I photographed 544 and 569. 544 was instantly recognisable by the aluminium strip here on the top. The only other time I saw them together was coming down, I think it's Lane House Road in Thornaby, but I was following 569 in the car and 544 came the other way, and I couldn't photograph them because I was bloody driving and the camera was here, and I was sorely tempted to go like that, but I thought I'd better not make crash. So I didn't get them, you know, that was the only time I got them on the same time. That's 544 coming round the loop there, getting ready to go to Hemlington.
That advert on the side goes back to its TNT days.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right.
It was actually painted on. And then it was covered over for years and years with vinyl adverts.
Yeah. What a shame we didn't keep it when it was restored. Yeah. Next. And that's the other view of it in the compound. 569 in the middle there, and halfway down is B500 MPY, which apparently is now in preservation. That's the little Leyland Dab demonstrator they had, which they took on. They also had that crazy looking Irish thing, didn't they? The little
Gack.
bombardier, Gack bombardier thing.
Both of them, little Leyland Dab survived. Both of them survived.
Yes, because there was two, wasn't there? Jim Stones operated them.
That's in
After
preservation
United.
now as well because he's packed up someone's bought it.
Oh, right, okay then. Yeah,
It's actually out and about and active now.
right. But the
Right.
Gack isn't, is it? That
No,
went
the
to
Gack,
Dublin
yeah,
somewhere. I think
no,
that's
that
dead. Yeah. Next. And there's 569 again. Needless to say, I took plenty of photographs of what I could get at the time. Next. And there she is, just going out to Hemlington.
What on earth's going on here?
Oh, they put some extra bits and pieces in because of all the horrendous oil leaks.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether 544 is like that as well.
No.
It's not. And then, horror of horrors, we came back to the depot one day and 569 was nose up against the fence. Now, when we first started the 500 group, the group's choice was to have that one because it was in the best overall condition. You know, so now we're down to 544 being active, and it was a case of 544 or nothing. So anyway, so that's 560 and 569 dead now, so we're down to one. Next. There's the two of them, 560 on the right and 569 on the left, both looking very dead. So there's 544. That was again another after work shot. I came out after finishing work, and there it was on the 52, and I then proceeded to, when it come back around the high street, I went on it back home. Now, in 1985, when I just started Halfords, I'd come out, and one of the trainers, 557, was there, and I had my camera with me, and for the life of me, I can't understand why I never took a photograph of it. It was just sat there in perfect sunlight, like that, nice and pretty, and I never took a photograph of it. And I still keep myself now. You know, such are the things in enthusiasm. You sometimes miss great shots. Next. There's another shot of it on the 116. So at this time it was mainly confined to doing duplicates or little local services that didn't take it away very far. There's the back end of it. This is from 1988. Now it's got a half radiator there. Like. And I was photographing it, and this road passed, and luckily I managed to get the two together on the same shot. Yeah, a bit close, but never mind. Yeah.
Took your life with your hands there, man.
How was that? Hit you up?
You took your life with your hands there.
I was actually stood on the curb. I was nowhere near the road. I was actually on the curb, but I had a telephoto lens, so because it magnified it, and I couldn't sort like.
This is that livery that they were sort of looking at using, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully they didn't.
Remarkably now, like going northeast.
Yes, they copied it almost. Didn't they? Well, there was two like this. There was this Olympian 234, and there was a Leyland National, and it first made its appearance at the 1987 Open Day at Darlington, if you remember.
Yes, I was there.
You were there playing in the band, which I never photographed.
I know. Can you imagine me being there?
I was just a young enthusiast at the time.
Grange Road.
Grange Road.
Yeah, that was the first pure bus event I ever went to. And I got my first Cleveland Transit slides from that event off Ken and Marie Hoggett.
I had like a false moustache on and things like that.
Did you? No wonder I never recognised you. Anyway, so that was, go back one, that was the one that was in the anniversary livery, the red and yellow livery. And it would have still been in that livery had somebody not run it into a wall. And then it came out in that colour scheme. Had to run it into a wall again, but there we go. Next. So 544 was now working services up to North Tees. I'd followed it all the way up in the car, leapfrogging it and getting pictures and photographing it there at North Tees. And the bloke who was driving it said, "Are you from the traffic commissioners?" I said, "No," I says, "I'm an enthusiast wanting to photograph it." He said, "Oh, that's all right then." I don't know who he was, I never found out who the driver was, but I wasn't bothered. You know. Next. There it is coming back from North Tees. Harder, it doesn't look like that now. Next. And there she is just going into Stockton High Street on that little U-turn. Next. So, round about middle of 1988, 544 was used as a driver trainer for a short period. The reason being that some of the girls out of the office who'd been in the shambles were now going to be drivers, and there was 3 of them who hadn't been through the test. So 544 was given a new gearbox and a complete overhaul and was used as a driver trainer. And it went up to Newcastle a couple of times because I've got a slide of it in Biker Depot. And because the lasses told us where it was a girl called Liz. She told us what they'd done with it. She'd said that it had been fitted with a new gearbox and a new engine and all the rest of it, and that they'd gone up to Newcastle to get route experience. Yeah. Anyway, that's it in the yard. That's it at the back view of it, just with L plates on. Next. At the same time, 2 of the LDCPs were turned into driver trainers. This one, 74, was to have been a permanent driver trainer, and it was going to be painted in the yellow driver training livery that a leopard was painted in. Unfortunately, they decided to get rid of it instead, which is a bit of a nuisance, because that would have looked good in yellow as a driver trainer. Now, in 1988, 87, 88, it was an interesting time for demonstrators. And of course, in those days, demonstrators actually looked different, as opposed to looking similar to the service buses. And this, I think, was the East Lancs bodied Scania from A1 services in Scotland, or at least it was in their livery. And they had it at Transit for a little while, and we photographed it. Richard Smiles is hiding behind the bus, but we'd all gone out to photograph it, and it was on the 37. Now, the reason why they put the demonstrators on the 37 is because it then, at that time, gave it the greater operating conditions, more varied operating conditions. So it was used on that. At that time, it went to Park End, but I've never seen a picture of the demonstrator in Park. That one went to Dunline of Nottingham, and eventually ended up with Nottingham Corporation. It's gone now, it's dead now. E200WHS it is. Next. That was closely followed by this Volvo Alexander demonstrator, which sounded like a truck, you know, and was not as refined as the other one, but it was still an interesting bus to chase round. Bearing in mind that those days we were just an enthusiast. Next. There it is in Stockton High Street. It's coming in on the 37 again. E826, 825 DMS. Next. And that was followed a year later by this Renault, Northern Counties bodied Renault. And that's it in Stockton Depot. Now, somewhat surprisingly enough, this Renault still survives. It ended up in London somewhere, and then when I went to Sandtoft, well, a good 5 years ago now, that turned up, and it was restored in London red. So,
So the last time we went there was a group, Chris, it was there.
I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah. We could buy that back and put it in that condition, couldn't we? Yeah, next. That's great. Now there were some interesting vehicles used by other operators at the time, and like I said, I did photograph some of them. This little operator, Hart Coaches, was perhaps the most interesting. This is a former City of Hull Metro Scania, which they had 3 of them, 2 from Tyne-and-Wear PTE, and this one from Kings upon Hull. And they also had ex-Greater Manchester Fleet Line and a load of coaches.
Where were they actually based?
Somewhere where there's a retail park now, in Thornaby. I can't remember exactly where.
Just over Victoria Bridge.
Yes, that's right, yeah, just over Victoria Bridge on the left. The Hart Coaches, yeah, Hart Coaches had one of those ex-Ribble Standerwick Bristol VRs, which has been preserved. Next. Delta Coaches, former taxi operator turned to buses. This was the most interesting thing they had. Teesside at that time was a Bristol RE mecca, because you had Delta Coaches with a load, and then you had Hartlepool with a load, and then further up the road you had Catcher Bus with a load as well. So the north east was a Bristol RE mecca. This was from Warrington, and it's a hideous East Lancs bodied thing, but it was really interesting. Yeah, it was an interesting bus, and I photographed that several times. Yeah, and then one day I was working in Halfords. My mate Howard comes up and says, "Have you seen the old bus in Stockton depot?" So, right, okay, then dinner time, legged it down to the depot, asked if we could go in and photograph the bus. I said yes. Photographed 417 DCD, former Southdown Queen Mary, latterly in use with United Automobile Services on the Scarborough Seafront services. It's one of Southdown's convertible open toppers, and it was just sat there in the yard. Next. There's it from the other side. Next. And then it moved into flowers, where we also found this Leyland Titan, it's a PD3 Titan, FTE 631D, which apparently was owned by one of the drivers, but never found out who it was. Never ever found out who actually owned it. But that bus is in preservation now, I think it's somewhere in the northwest, back on its home territory. That's in the back of Flowers when it was a coach shed, because all the frontline coaches were all kept in Flowers. And 500 was painted like that. Now originally it was going to be painted all over yellow, but the painter said to Malcolm Howard, we should paint the bottom bit green because the yellow will get dirty very quickly and it'll look hideous. So they painted it in that version of the green, and that's how it looked. The private hires, and we attended Santoff rally with it when we first took it out, and they did offer it to us at the time, but because it wasn't a native transit vehicle, we decided not to. But again, how I wish we'd kept it. It would have been a crowd pull of that now. But the vehicle is now fully restored back in its Southdown livery at the Worthing Bus Museum.
I remember when Towlaw Town
Yeah.
Football Club went to Wembley in the FA Vars, and they played Tiverton Town,
Yeah.
and they lost, but they still had an open top parade round Towlaw, and that was the bus they used.
And that was the open topper. All right, you get any pictures of that?
Unfortunately not. No. We were there with the band,
Right.
and we played round the village. As I said, they lost, but we still gave them a good day.
Yeah. Next. And then the 500 group was born. Yay! That was a little railway-style headboard that Howard Williams made, and we put it on the front when we got to Santoft bus rally. He's still got that, but he's sort of like a tight ass. He keeps it in his loft, he won't give it back to the group. Yeah. But it looks quite good on 500 bus. Next. So, as I said before, when we first started, we took Bristol VR 114 to the Bradford bus rally, and it was sold days afterwards. That's it in the yard, waiting to go to Jones of Llanfethlew, who bought 3 of them. The other one was 113, and the third one, of course, was 106. At the time, we tried to buy that, but Malcolm had said it had already been sold. But that's it in the yard, preparing to go. Next. So 544, by late 1989, was now out of use and dumped in the crock yard. there was a period of about a year and a half where nothing happened to it because Transit were preparing, getting the buses repainted in the deregulation livery and had other issues on the mind other than painting a bus for us. Next. It sat there for quite a while, and the two Dennis Dominators on one occasion were parked next to it, so I thought that's too good a photo to miss. So I thought I'd get a picture of that. Next. And then it was moved. It was moved to where the buses come out of the bus wash now. It was moved on that area there. Now, if I remember rightly, Howard Williams took a photograph of myself and Nick Dowling there, kneeling on the floor, bowing to it. But he won't give us the slide to take, to put it on, or to put that in otherwise. Yeah. But again, it sat there for quite a while until it was carted off to be painted. Who thinks it would be a good idea to have it repainted back in Transit Green? No? Why not?
Yes.
We look good. Yeah. Next. And then it was moved over to the former BRS depot at Thornaby over the river, and it sat there for a few months, and we would go there and have a look at it over the river, make sure nobody had set it alight. And then it was dragged back to Stockton, so next, where it sat again inside the main shed. You can see there they've tarted it up a bit, but it never got the new livery. No 500 ever got the deregulation livery. They were all out of service by then. Next. And then it was restored, or rather repainted, into full TNT wideband turquoise livery. And that was on the day before it was rolled out. Next. And there it is, parked in the yard, fully repainted into TNT turquoise and cream, making a very fine sight. Now the rally, we were going to take it to York. York was going to be the first rally, but on the way there was a wooden floor which had dropped slightly and was sitting on the hot exhaust. So of course wood and hot exhaust don't mix, it caught fire. So we were sat there batting the flames out almost till this fire engine came along and sorted it out. Luckily it was only scorched, it didn't do any major damage. But it went back in disgust, and it was not until York the following year that we actually got it to York Rally. And the rest, as they say, is history. I think you'll find that's the last one. Is it?
Yep.
Yeah. So there we are. That's the story of the chasing the 500s and the daft things that I did when I was an enthusiast.
Very good, Jason.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now you notice there was no German tanks, there was no German limousines, there was nothing else in
Not
there.
even any animals.
No animals. I was going to put a cat picture in just for a laugh, but I didn't. No? That's all right then.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Okay.
Very good.
Right. That will go on archive.
Links in the background there, Chris.
What?
Links in the background.
Yeah. They were just all parked there. That was just normal parking area in the space. There was nothing dead.
Which one we got, John?
612.
612.
617.
2.
612. Yeah.
Much clearer on here than it is on there.
Yeah.
Did they get him with the deck charge?
Is that 500 bus next to the links?
No.
No.
Dominator.
Dominator.
Dominator to the right of it.
Yeah.
544's 50 next year.
Yeah, I think I'll send them a
Well,
message.
you come
I'll
on.
find out next fortnight. Soon.
No, I'm available for that rally, but I won't be driving because I've just finished driving and I'll be half dead.
I'll be too tired.
You what?
I'll be too tired. You should still be in the groove.
I'm half dead as it is when I come off work.
Straight off the back shift, straight in.
Yeah, might take a couple of process.
There's a